Hi guys and girls, welcome to the video. This next one is basically all about how to get into triathlon, what it's all about. A lot of people have been asking, thinking they're hoping to get into it maybe from one sport background, and they really don't know how to get into it or what it's about. They get intimidated by it. As the video title says, it's not all about Ironman. I'm going to go into a few reasons as to why that's not the case and how it's a bit more achievable to get into the sport, especially if you're daunted by it and not sure how to get into it. So I'm going to try and keep this fairly simple and fairly generic. I'm not going to go into all the different facets of training and racing strategies and things like that. We can cover them in other videos. So I'm not going to, for example, talk about at this stage percentage FTP you should be training at, fat metabolism, HRV readings, periodization of training, polarization of training, red mist sets, all of these things that people just get overwhelmed with. We're not doing that yet. They'll be covered in other videos. As I've said before on my previous video, if there's anything in particular you want to know about and you're interested in and you want me to cover, please do leave a comment down below and I will cover them in future videos. Okay, so a few things to clear up that people often have misconceived ideas about. Firstly, as we said, triathlon isn't all about Ironman. I keep saying that, but it's not. There's so many ways of getting into it, and people just get overawed sometimes. They'll see Kona or Nice each year, and these are huge events, and I have not much respect for them and anybody that doesn't. However, people see that, they see it once a year on TV. Okay, it's better now, there's a lot more coverage, especially with YouTube and things like this, and social media covering it all. Certainly when I got into sport, Kona was about the only race that got put on. Onto TV, and you would think that was it, and if you're not racing as an age grouper for 10, 12, 14 hours, you're not doing the sport. Also, it gets banded around a lot that Ironman is a sport. Ironman is not a sport, triathlon is a sport. Ironman, essentially, it's not even a distance, to be honest. It's a brand. Ironman themselves are a company. I am qualified by them through their Ironman University. It's one of my many qualifications in triathlon and swimming, cycling and running. But they do basically brand their races. So if you're talking about an Ironman race, in parentheses, nowadays it means you're doing a race that is put on by and organised by the corporation that is Ironman. Now that can be a full distance, which is what everybody thinks of when they think of Ironman, and it's what people say, I'm an Ironman, if they've done a full distance. It could be a 70.3, half the distance, or it could even be a 51.50, which is essentially the same as an Olympic distance. Now, one of my pet peeves is when people say, I'm an Ironman, and they haven't done a full distance. They've done a 70.3, they've done a 51.50. Yes, you've done an Ironman branded race, but that's not an Ironman. So Ironman, essentially, as a coverall, when people are talking about that, they're talking about a full distance race. So that would be a 2.4 mile swim, 3.8 kilometres, 112 mile bike, 180 kilometres, and a full marathon run, which is 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometres. So whilst there are the Ironman events, and they're very popular, especially with the Ironman series around the world, across 70.3 and full distance, there are other ways of doing a full distance. Challenge series, there's Outlaw back in the UK. One of my athletes did that last year. It was her first full distance race. Did the race amazingly. To think that she came to me a couple of years ago and said, oh, just fancy doing a sprint, and then ends up doing a full distance. It shows where you can go when you start from just even getting into sprint distance races. With going back to the idea of Kona and Nice and seeing that on TV and thinking that's all it's about, it's a bit like seeing Wimbledon on the TV 2 weeks a year and thinking the only way I can play tennis is going to a fancy super grass court, playing on TV for 2 weeks a year. The rest of the year there's nothing to happen. Not the case. There's so many races all around the world, and going, as I will speak from experience where I started, you can start in sprint distance, work your way up and go from there. You can stay at sprint distance. These races are, depending how quick you are, maybe an hour and 15, hour and 30, depending on the conditions and what kit you've got and how fit you are. That's a reachable target for most people. Now, you don't have to be superhuman to do these events. As long as you're reasonably fit, and I will caveat it that you should, if you're looking to get into it, be checked over by a medical professional before you do any sort of extreme exercise. but you can do a sprint distance race with maybe 3 or 4 months training. Slight caveat, if you can't swim, you may need a little bit longer. It's not a good idea to do your first race when you can't swim and enter it, and then say, I'll be able to swim by the time it comes around. I have had athletes that have done that and had to push back and push back and push back their first race until it was safe to do so, especially here in Oman. 99% of the races, they are open water in the sea, and on safety reasons, I've had to pull athletes and postpone their races. So if swimming is not your strongest event and you're not a swimmer, you haven't had lessons when you were younger, etc., maybe bear that in mind. But generally, as long as you're reasonably fit, 3 or 4 months, you can get into decent shape to do a sprint triathlon. So the training itself is going to be very different depending on your background, whether you have swum, biked or ran in the past competitively, or whether for fun or whatever it be. I would say as general rule for getting into sprint racing, all you need to be able to do is basically to do 2 sessions a week across all of the sports. So straight away in your head you're thinking, okay, that's 6 sessions a week, 1 a day, I can do that. That's not quite how it works. It's going to be 8 sessions because you need to factor in 2 strength and conditioning sessions. I said earlier, it's a strength endurance sport. Not only for performance benefits do you need to do your strength work, but also for your injury prevention. I covered a lot of this in the previous video. If I can work out how to do it, I'll put a link up somewhere. But if not, I'll put the link in the comments below and you can have a look on that. But strength and conditioning work is so important. So you've got your 8 sessions a week. So talking about your 6 actual swim, bike and run sessions, you can change that slightly. If you've got one that's very weak, obviously you'll need to do more on it. So if you can't swim, then you don't need to be doing an hour of swimming each session, but you could do 2 hours of work a week, but you can split that into 4 lots of 30 minutes as an example. Frequency is the key when it comes to the technique sports more than anything else. So you're always better at doing 4 sessions a week of 30 minutes than 2 1 hours anyway. The good news doing these sessions, once you get the hang of them, you can, especially as you're moving towards your actual race, is you can start to double up on them. I've spoken before about strength training, that you can double up on that. So if you're already warmed up from doing your swim session, you can just go straight into the gym at your facility and crack out your strength training. You don't have to go home, get showered, get changed, eat, rest, do all that side of it, and then drive to the gym again, warm up again, etc., etc. You can double up. More specifically, I'm talking about things like the brick sessions. We'll cover this in another video, but essentially your brick sessions are when you're trying to get your legs used to, normally, your legs used to running off the bike. You can do brick sessions where you're biking after a swim. Not quite so important and not quite so popular, but they will make a massive difference when it comes to race day. I have experience of people, not that I've coached, who have gone into the first race having never run off the bike, and it's a very different sensation. The good news with brick training, you don't have to do 2 long sessions back to back. You should always do a longer session in all of sports each week, but with a lot of my athletes, what I tend to do is have their longer bike here on the weekend is a Friday, Saturday. They'll have a longer bike on a Friday, and they'll do a short, fast, maybe 15 minutes. It depends on what distance they're doing, but a shorter, faster run straight off the bike on the Friday, and then they'll do their longer run the next day with a bit of fatigue already in their legs from the Friday session on the Saturday. So you're ticking a lot of boxes, and you're killing a lot of birds with 1 stone. I've got nothing against birds, by the way. Okay, so a quick word on kit. Now there's some pieces of kit that are brilliant. It's what I basically call the Gucci factor. You see something shiny and nice and you want it. A lot of it's there to make you faster. That's not so important. What's more important is the stuff that's there to stop you getting injured and to make your life a lot easier. So for example, on the bike, you can have a bottom of the range road bike with 7 or 8 speed gears on, not very aerodynamic, might weigh 10 or 11 kilograms. That's not going to make you any more injury prone than having a 7 kilo TT bike that costs tens of thousands. However, running shoes, number 1 biggest thing to consider. Now, whilst I can remember doing my first race in tennis shoes, I speak from experience with a lot of injuries from doing things the wrong way when I was younger. I got into the sport at 14. I didn't have a massive wealth of knowledge at that point. There wasn't the knowledge available there is today. I didn't have a coach for all the sessions. Whilst I did have coaches for swimming, I didn't have a coach advising me on biking and running. I did what I thought was best. That included my choice of running shoes and how long I used them. There's great apps nowadays that keep track of how many kilometres or miles you run in your shoes. Keep an eye on that. You don't want to be using the same pair of shoes for a year, running 2 or 3 times a week. You're going to get injured. The other thing that people forget is don't use the same shoes on consecutive days. I strongly believe that you need to rotate your shoes. It does mean having more than one pair and buying them, and keep them just for running. So don't go out and do the gardening in them, or keep walking around the mall or something in them, okay? I've got a selection of shoes actually over there, and they're sitting there nicely and clean. 2 pairs haven't been used for a while because they're my racing shoes, but they're all there, and I will never use the same pair on 2 consecutive days. Give them 24 hours for the foam to adjust, to refill as such, and give you the cushioning. But above all else, don't skimp on them. Yes, you might be able to find some running shoes that look nice, that are very cheap. Okay, if they're in a sale, that's a slightly different thing, but essentially the more you spend on them, the better shoes you're going to get, and they will help you to prevent running. But more so than how much you spend is actually the type of shoe they are. So different shoes are made for different types of runners, whether you're a supinator, overpronator, whatever it be. You might land on your heels, you might be a very heavy person, and then you're going to need more cushioning. So don't just go because they look nice and get the top of the range, carbon plated, the ones with the big fancy heels on that look all snazzy, and then you use them for training all the time. I have got a pair of carbon shoes. They are sitting there, as I said. I'm looking at them and I'm wondering off the top of my head when I last used them. It would have been my last race. That would be, I used them, didn't really need them for the last 70.3 I did in Muscat back in February, March. Yeah, I didn't need them. I wasn't running fast enough to use them, and I had a bit of a hamstring issue, so I was hobbling around. It was a bit of a numpty walking in carbon fibre shoes. However, I do have them for when I do 5k sprint races, speed sessions I might use them in, but I wouldn't go and do my long run in them. So make sure you get a pair of shoes that are fitted to you and get more than one pair. If you are going to be able to get more than one pair, say you get 2, I would say don't get the same type of shoe. Don't just get the same shoe and buy 2 pairs of them. Okay, that would tick a lot of the boxes of things I've just said, but I would say get a heavier duty, more cushioned pair for your longer work, and then get something a bit lighter, a bit more responsive, not necessarily carbon fibre plated, but something that is going to give you a bit more response and make you go a bit quicker and get that cadence up on your faster sessions. Okay, if you're still not sure about whether you want to get into the sport or not, there are other options as your stepping stones. You can do aquathlons or duathlons. So you can just do the swim and run. You could do the run, bike, run, especially for those people that aren't yet up to it for the swimming, but they've worked on their running and biking and they want to race. Duathlons are a great idea. There's also relay races. Some of my athletes have come to me in the past having completed one section of a 70.3 and they decided that's for me, I want to do it, but I don't know how to do the other 2 sports. It's another avenue in. You can still appreciate and get to enjoy all the camaraderie side of it, but you don't have to obviously train for all 3 sports initially, and you can get into it that way. Okay, another thing that people will ask me about is their nutrition. Now, for 70.3 and certainly full distance, nutrition is such a big part of it. However, with the sprint distance being so much shorter and the training being so much shorter, as long as you've got a good diet and you're choosing the right things over the wrong things, then you're going to be okay. You don't need to spend loads of money on gels and carb drinks and all this kind of thing. I say you don't need to, it will still benefit you, but you don't need to do it. Whereas if you were going out for a 6-hour bike, yes, you would need it. As long as you've got a healthy diet, you're just making the right choices, and you're getting the carbs into the system and a decent amount of protein to help rebuild the muscle damage that you're going to be causing by training, then you should be okay. I would say 24 to 48 hours before a race, then you might need to dress just a little bit more and tweak things you're doing just to make sure you're completely carbo loaded for your race. But as we said, this is a sprint race, you shouldn't really be taking any more than 90 minutes. You should have enough glycogen in your body for 90 minutes of exercise without the need to take on loads of gels and all this side of it. You're then also not going to experience what many people will have heard about previously with the GI distress that people get with gels and carb drinks going into their system, and that can end up very messy on a race course. You don't need to worry about that with sprint races. So once you're involved in doing sprint races and you think, that's for me, you can go longer or you can go more serious with it. So you said about the half distance or full distance, 7.3 and the Ironman type of racing. You don't have to go that way. If you want to progress and improve, you can stick at sprint races and try and be more competitive. There's a lot of races you do where you've got age group, usually in 5-year age bands, where you can try and be more competitive and try and work your way up. You can represent your country as sprint and Olympic distance. You don't have to try and qualify for 7.3 or Worlds or Kona or Nice. It doesn't have to be about trying to improve the distance. You can try and improve your time. And there's selection races and different ways of doing that, which you can look into once you're at that level. Alternatively, you can keep it fun and just keep it as a participation sport. Keep the training down 4, maybe 6 hours a week in total, and you can enjoy it. And you can just repeatedly do sprint races. You never have to go up. In distance. You never have to try and get better and beat everybody. You can just enjoy it, as we said earlier, and getting around and enjoying the whole experience of actually being and calling yourself a triathlete. Okay, a quick plug for me. I do offer coaching services for triathlon, whether it's across swimming, cycling, or running, or strength work, be it in person or remotely. You don't have to be an age group world champion to benefit from a personal program set for you by a qualified experienced coach. So I have taken on people before. I mentioned one person who did their full distance after just coming to me and wanting to do sprints. So people can come to me, they get a monthly program, they get all of their sessions written in their heart rate or power or speed, whatever it needs to be, and their intervals set. They get general advice on their nutrition and what they should be doing to recover. Millions of different things that come into it. Too many to go into now. I might have to do a separate video on that. But there are, as of 2 days ago, there are now 2 more spaces available on that. So places are limited. I'm not one of these that's going to take on hundreds and hundreds of athletes. Another pet peeve of mine, because if somebody's coaching you and they've got 200 athletes, they're probably not putting 1,000,000% effort into actually coaching you. There's probably a lot of copy and pasting going on, or they're outsourcing the coaching somebody else, and it isn't the person you think that's coaching you that's actually coaching you. With my athletes, they know that I'm pretty much 24 hours a day available to them. I'll get constant WhatsApps at sometimes 9, 10, 11 o'clock in the evening. I'll also get them before 5 o'clock in the morning. It's fine, it's part of my job. I'm completely okay with that. And that works. And people get the best benefit they can. As I said, you don't have to be a world champion or world age group qualifier to benefit from it. You can be looking to get into the sport and want some general advice, and then you can get that on the program. And also, going back to me making mistakes when I was younger, there's somebody that's neutral, that's overlooking you, that's going to see when you're training loads too much. Whilst you might be enjoying it, you do a good couple of weeks of training thinking, yeah, I'm getting stronger, you're not getting the rest. But our coach will see that and they'll hold you back, which is usually the biggest complaint I get from my athletes is, why are you giving me a rest day? Why am I having an adaptation week? I feel fine. You might feel fine now, but if we don't do it in a couple of weeks' time, you're going to start picking up illnesses, niggles, that kind of thing, and fatigue. Right, so that just about wraps up the video. Hopefully you found it informative and got some good information out of it. If there's anything in particular you want to know, ask me in the comments down below, or you can go onto my Instagram and there's a lot of information there on training. There's swim specific sessions, sample sessions for beginners and intermediates. There's loads of training advice on there. So that's at Coach Carl Try. Otherwise, you can put a comment down below. Tell me what you want to see in the next video, and I'll see you then. Thanks a lot.